Welcome to another knowledge sharing episode of 30 Minutes with HR. 30 Minutes with HR is a partnership program between KUSI Consulting and the Association of African Universities. It is your premier human resource show for employers, employees, and job seekers. And as always, we have a special guest for you. Today, I am joined by none other than Mrs. Irene Asare. Irene Asare is a global transformational leader. She is also the Business Services Director at Tullow Ghana. We'll be right back and I will tell you exactly what the topic is for today's conversation.
Welcome to Adansi Travels Product Knowledge Series. And I'm excited to talk to you about our FIT tour service, where you get the opportunity to customize the products to your taste. And with that, we take your details, your destination you want to go, the date you want to travel. We're able to do it to suit your budget. So you don't need to worry about breaking the bank when you are traveling with this kind of service. You can visit us as the details are on the screen as you see, or you can call us on the numbers showing on the screen. Let's plan your trip for you, and you know with Adansi, we always let you feel the beauty of life.
Adansi Travel feels life's beauty.
Welcome back. Today we are discussing adding value to businesses and transforming HR through mentorship. How exactly do industry professionals do this? Before I introduce you to our special guest, I would like to thank our sponsors. Thank you, Adansi Travel. They actually got us here on set today. Thank you to Nationwide Medical Insurance. Be sure to give them a call for your healthcare needs. And of course, thank you, AH Hotel. We have been filming some of our episodes in their executive lounge. Now I am ready to get started. So, are you excited?
I am. I'm very excited.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, we are joined by Mrs. Irene Asare. So Irene, before we dig deep into the questions, I want you to share a bit with us about, you started a HR mentoring program for young professionals. And I think that mentorship program ties into today's conversation. So I kind of want you to give us some brief history about that.
Sure, I'm more than happy to. Thank you so much, Rita, for inviting me here today. And
Definitely.
I'm really excited at the opportunity to talk about the mentoring program. It's a little bit of a story. I'm a little bit of a storyteller. And it really did have quite an impact on me as a person. So for a long while now, I've had lots of people contact me, can I be their mentor? And I was happy to do so. What was very interesting, my first mentor actually contacted me through LinkedIn.
Wow.
And I responded to his email, to his surprise. And I just felt that his email stood out. He needed some help at the time, and we're still in touch today.
Wow.
Since then, lots of other people had contacted me, and it got to a point where it was becoming too big for me to manage. And so I said to myself, what else can I do? So I speak to people on a one-on-one basis. I might speak to them every month. I wanted to think about how else I could probably impact society and people, and particularly the profession. So what was really interested in 2016, I was named the HR Practitioner of the Year by the Institute of Human Resources.
Excellent.
And I felt like this is what I wanted to do, to give back. For me, it wasn't just about being named, but it was also about giving back to our profession.
Exactly.
And I'm super passionate about our profession. I feel that HR is critical to any organisation, and it has a prominent role in our organisations and in society. And if you think about it, people are our greatest asset. Without people, we can't run a nation, we can't run a business.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, the mentoring program was born. And I said to myself, I wanted something longer lasting. I didn't want to just call a bunch of professionals in for a day or two. And so I thought, let's make this 12 months. And actually what has helped me in my career is having a big brother or a big sister that looks out for you.
Exactly.
And I call them the cheerleaders that cheer us on regardless of what we've done well or what we haven't done well, but they're interested in us as people.
Exactly.
So from there, the mentoring was born. I was a bit nervous, if I'm honest, because I felt, my goodness, who's actually going to be interested in doing this for 12 months? How will I pair individuals? But I knew a lot of colleagues and friends of HR background, and I knew they were just as passionate as I was.
Okay.
So I reached out to them. I spoke to the Institute. Of course, they were very, very supportive. And the program was born.
Wow.
And we haven't looked back. It's been amazing, impactful, humbling. It's been a fantastic experience so far.
Good. I mean, and I've been following the program for a while. I think I was actually at the graduation for the first cohort. And I started thinking, myself and a few colleagues who were there just started thinking, how can we be a part of this? How can we be a part of this amazing movement? You know, because when we talk about mentorship, it's not a one-time thing. It's not something you do one day and then you think you've made an impact on someone's life. So I think that 1 year, that 1 year duration that you have to the program, it's awesome. And then there's also
I mean, I
follow-ups
wanted
as well.
to be very clear that it was very different from coaching.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people think about coaching and then mentoring, and I think it's the same thing. In
Exactly.
reality, it's
It's a
coaching
difference.
for me is about immediate behavioural issues that you might have in the organisation or in your business today, and you need a solution and you need a fix.
Exactly.
What I'm talking about mentorship is 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. You've developed such great relationships with that big brother or big sister or that senior or trusted advisor, as I call it,
Okay.
that you can call upon them and they really had an impact in your life and in
Exactly.
your career going forward.
Exactly. And I have this saying where I say that a mentor can be a coach, but a coach cannot be a mentor.
Absolutely.
You know, and I
absolutely,
strongly believe that.
absolutely.
So when I started out my HR career, I still stay in touch with the gentleman who I was lucky enough to work under.
Excellent,
You know, so
excellent.
mentorship, I think, in our line of work is really critical.
Absolutely. And I think, Rita, people really underestimate what it's like to have a mentor. I have a lot of people, like I said, that contact me just for advice. I mean, it's very different getting advice from somebody who you trust and respect in your profession versus your best mate.
Exactly.
I mean, don't get me wrong, best mates, we give great advice, I'm sure.
It's true.
But from a work perspective,
It's quite
someone who's
different.
seen it, done it, has failed, who's going to tell you, try not to do this, think about that, is a very different offering.
Okay.
And I think that for lots of people, and I always say that, you know, people who have been hugely successful, if you look back in their career, they've actually had a mentor.
Of course.
They've had
of
someone
course.
that guides them along the path, and it hasn't always been smooth.
Okay.
And I'm sure that if it was smooth, we probably wouldn't need people.
Exactly.
But because it isn't smooth and life is like that, it's good to have somebody who's
to
on your
guide
side.
to guide you.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
couldn't agree more. We will come back to mentorship, but before we do, I would like you to share some light on how industry professionals can transform their sector. What can they do to be change agents in their sector without disrupting the organizational culture? We talk a lot about culture, but I can't imagine it being easy to transform an organization.
Yeah, I've been in many transformational
Yes, you have.
positions. I've done some very challenging and difficult things
Okay.
that hasn't been easy.
Okay.
What I say is a couple of things, is bringing people along with you on the journey, I think is
Okay.
important. Don't get me wrong, sometimes people will resist. It's human nature.
Of course.
We're aware of the change curve where you start, where you're in kind of shock and denial and anger, and then you come to acceptance and so on. I think the transformation process is similar to that. I think what's important about transformation is recognizing that there is a need to change. There is a need to do things differently. There is a
Okay.
need to transform. Then it is about, how do I identify the people that are going to help me move this change forward? Because I think if you and I agree, change is not easy.
No, not at all.
But it's funny,
Not at all.
we're changing all the
Exactly.
time. Sometimes we resist change and we come kicking and screaming. Sometimes we accept change and it becomes easier. Either way, we often find that the person we were 5 years ago is not the person we are today.
Exactly.
We've gone through some process.
Exactly.
So coming back to your question about how do we transform a place, an industry without disrupting culture, I challenge that. I think that you will disrupt some level of culture. The challenge is, can you do it positively? And can you do it to ensure that you do not negatively impact your business as a result?
Okay.
I think for a lot of people out there, there'll be organizations that need to change, don't know how to change, and will have to take the transformation step, one step at a time, in order to bring people along. So I think the organizational culture, as you go through that process, you will also change.
Okay.
What is important is the word that you used, disruptive. And making sure, I mean, nowadays we talk about disruptive, there's a lot new age technology, future of work, etc. And we talk about disruption. Disruption can be a good thing, but it has to be well managed.
Interesting. So how were you able to distinguish, and you can use any of the organizations that you worked with as an example, how were you able to come to that realization that, wow, change needs to happen? How does one...
There are different I mean, obviously, I'm not going to name an organisation.
No, definitely not.
But I would say I've worked in a number of multinational, great companies. And I say great companies because they perform well, they really look after their people. My current organisation, for sure. But there comes a time when you realise that things are not working. So, for example, it can be that you're hearing the same, let's say, issue over and over again. It could be, for example, we need better technology. And how do we, if we had better technology, we could do this in half the time and we could create efficiency. That is change, that could be transformation. I sometimes think that we think about transformation as this big, disruptive ball that has to come and really kind of change everything around. You can do big change and you can do small change, and I've done them all. And what I would say in that regard, it is about just making sure that you identify what is the problem that you're trying to solve. I often say this over and over again, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And then asking other people. We don't always have all of the answers, but I can guarantee you the people that we work with generally do.
You have the answers.
And then it is about taking sometimes what seems like a really big issue into small, tiny chunks and looking at these issues one step at a time. Before you know it, this big transformation, so for example, I have transformed an organisation that has lost 1,000 employees. The way I approached it, I didn't look at it and thought, my goodness, obviously we're going to impact people's lives. I mean, there's a lot of weight on you as a person. But then you have to say to yourself, I have to do this bit first, I have to do this bit, and I take it in chunks and I go through the process. And I think what's really important about our profession is being sensitive and empathetic about the environment and the situation, and the fact that anything that we do around transformation and change, for example, will impact people at some level.
Exactly. I was actually going to ask you about that because you've worked in South Africa, you've worked in the UK. That's what we mean by global transformational leader. So were there anything specific based on the demographic that you think affected the way in which you transformed? Is there anything to be mindful of based on location?
It's interesting, but I always say people are people. That is what is interesting. We all generally feel the same things in many similar situations. But often when I'm in Ghana, people say, oh, in Ghana our culture is like this or it's like that. When I went and lived in South Africa, our culture is like this. Yes, there are slight differences, but that's history, that's context. But when you're talking about a transformation program at work that says requires you from tomorrow or from next year, we are now going to have this process, we're going to do it in this way, it's going to be different. It is going to be different, and people generally will react according to the change curve. What I think is important is culture. So if there are differences, is culture. So for example, I often say in the UK, I have been in a culture where it's kind of work hard, play hard. So when it's time to work, we work.
It's time to work.
And it is focus. And if I see someone in the corridor, I can kind of walk past you and nobody will say anything. In Ghana, you can't do that.
No.
You can't just walk past someone in the corridor.
Unacceptable.
But yet you might be the same person acting in the best intention, thinking that you're not offending anyone. So I think it is important in the countries that I've worked with, and I've learned very quickly, to be very sensitive about the environment. Just because, for example, I may have seen it and done it before, doesn't mean that the method in which I use is going to be the same method I'll use in Ghana versus the UK versus any other country on the continent. So I'm mindful about going into those environments, studying the background, the context, and then reflecting and then thinking about how are we going to do this process here.
You have to adapt to the culture or where you find yourself. I think for me, having moved to Ghana, that was probably one of the toughest lessons I had to learn, because in the US, UK, we have this rigid system, right? Somebody does something, you write them up, you know, and then it leads to termination, and you come to Ghana and you realize those systems need to be a bit smoothed out a bit. You cannot stick to the same systems and structures that works abroad as here.
I just think the context is different.
Okay.
You know, the context is different. On our continent, jobs are hard to find. In the UK, I'm saying employment will also be difficult to find, but there is more available and different options available. Doesn't mean that we don't follow the outcome if that's what's required. It's just that we have to think sensitively about how we go about doing this.
I agree 100%. So now my mantra for this whole year, I think actually since last year, has been adding value. Adding value means so much to employers nowadays, right? If we're going to get hired, it's because employers want to know what value can you bring to the organization. And I watched you lead a session on the role of the human resource business partner, and you actually spoke about adding value to organizations. And this doesn't even have to be a response or advice to just HR. It can just be a general response to job seekers, to anyone in the employee sector. How do you add value or create value for your organization? What do you do?
I think it's a really, very passionate about this particular part. I think what is important is, again, I think that we can't just think about we're employed, we have a job, and therefore I'm doing the organisation a favour.
Okay, but you get that a lot in Ghana.
Well, I think again, I wouldn't narrow it to Ghana actually.
Okay.
I think you have lots of different countries with
Where
lots
that
of
happens.
different contexts.
Okay.
I experienced a lot of interesting things in South Africa.
Okay.
So I think that sometimes we just think it's Ghana when actually, when you look wider, it's across the board.
Okay.
I think what is important in value is identify what does the business need. If you're coming to work on a regular basis and you want to do what you want to do, and you think what you're doing is adding value, but yet the organisation is saying, this is not what I need from you, I need X from you, how do you ensure that you create that? For me, creating value is being efficient, not making so many mistakes or learning from those mistakes, thinking ahead about how we can improve things, how we can be different. I always say, for example, if you're in a business, and let's say you're a business partner of HR or supply chain or finance or whoever, and they're having a financial conversation, and you're the finance person responsible, and you're not even invited to the conversation, you need to ask yourself, why is that? Why is it they're having a financial conversation, I'm the finance person, and I'm not there? So I think at that point, is it because you go into the meeting and you say nothing? Is it because when you have your contribution, it doesn't really add to the conversation? These are the questions that we need to ask. What is the business goals? What are the objectives? And what is my role in that? And how can I add value? It's the same way as if you're an HR business partner or an HR professional. Your advice, your support, your guidance around particular processes, procedures, how to do things. If you're giving advice as an HR practitioner, and your organisation is getting itself into trouble and ending up in labour courts or wherever or grievances, you've got to ask yourself, are you adding value to that organization?
Because you could be doing more damage than
Possibly.
actually adding value.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for that great insight. So we are going to take a quick break.
Sure.
And when we get back, we have another set of questions for Mrs. Irene Asare. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Treat yourself to a serene, plush, and unique experience. Check in at the AH Hotel, East Legon, where every stay is unique.
Everybody wants to be the best at what they do for the people they're doing it for. That's why, after 13 years of providing you with top-notch healthcare nationwide, the market leader in the private health insurance industry is going the extra mile for you. Instead of hopping from pharmacy to pharmacy, now you get your prescription drugs delivered straight to your doorstep. We will restock your chronic medication on the regular, so you don't have to stress to keep track. We provide on-site clinics that offers you professional medical consultation from the comfort of your office. Enjoy these amazing benefits and so much more by signing on to Nationwide Medical Insurance today. Call us on 0800 222 222 or email us at info@nationwidemh.com. Nationwide, we go the extra mile so you don't have to. Join the healthcare family.
Welcome back to 30 Minutes with HR, a knowledge sharing program. Thank you to our sponsors yet again, Adansit Travels, AH Hotel, and Nationwide Medical Insurance. Welcome back, Irene.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we have a few more questions for you, and then sadly we have to wrap up. All right, so back to mentorship, right, which we started talking about mentorship. So how critical is the role of mentorship to transformation?
Super critical.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is, I think again with mentorship, as I've talked before, it's a personal journey. I'd like to think it's a life-changing process that we put people through on the general HR mentoring program. But anyone who's had a mentor, you go through a life-changing journey. How does that link with transformation? We're in 2019. We have years ahead of us. The world is changing. You know, the things that we used to do, we're not doing them anymore.
Exactly.
We're doing new things.
Exactly.
I mean, I always have this famous, wonderful kind of insight that everybody always talks about is, you know, for those of us who have children, for example, the jobs that they will be doing in the future are jobs that today don't exist. So, you know, they're going through their own education journey and they're jobs that don't exist.
Wow.
So for me, what is important is providing mentorship around your personal development, your personal achievement. Mentorship isn't about gaining more technical expertise. A lot of people that I meet already are qualified in X and Y. It is about, how do I approach this? How do I think about this? How do I deal with failure? I've just gone to a meeting and done a presentation and it was an absolute disaster. You know, I did this project and it wasn't as successful as I thought it was. How do I get an audience with my boss? And what do I say when I get there? for me, these are all skills that are required and needed if we are moving to a world where change is going to be really constant. A lot of people talk, for example, about the future of work and think, oh my gosh, the future of work, that means people are going to be out of roles. I disagree.
I do too.
I think that people will be in roles, but like I said, they'll be in different roles. So how is it that I start my career as a finance professional and maybe I'll end up as a creative person? I don't know. And therefore, how do I transition? How do I transform from one career to the next? I mean, for a lot of older people, they may have had one career or two or three. I'm told now you can have 4 or 5.
Of course.
So I think it's about the mindset, the skills, interpersonal skills development on how you deal with that change and transition.
I could not agree more. I think it's really about adapting because, like you said, change is constant, right? It's going to keep happening, but are you changing with the organization? As the organization is innovating and they're moving on to the future of work, right? What they perceive the future to be, are you able to change along with the organization? Because those are the employees that actually end up keeping their job and evolving within organizations. If you cannot change, your job obviously becomes obsolete. So,
and I would add to that, Rita, that it's also about changing with the profession, right? So, you know, the profession, staying ahead of what is happening in your own profession. There are lots of things that are happening in the human resources profession, for example. There are a lot of things that are now happening in the banking profession, for example. There are lots of things that are happening in the data profession, the telecoms profession, for example. How do you ensure you stay with your organization and you develop and you grow? But how do you ensure that within that space that you are really moving and developing as well?
I think we were discussing how in some organizations now, I mean, they're using AI and they're also using virtual reality as a way to do interviews. So you're not meeting the candidates, right? Isn't that interesting? Okay, so thank you for sharing knowledge on that. Now, I kind of want you to share or give our viewers just a bit of your strategies, and of course myself, what strategies have you been able to deploy to be able to lead transformational change effectively in some of the organizations that you've worked for?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think you just need to, I always have people in mind.
Okay.
You know, I go through a stage where I process, my goodness, this could impact people, because fundamentally that's what I care about. So I have people in mind.
Okay.
I try to reason with and talk with my senior leadership just about what we're trying to achieve. And, you know, you have to ask why and how and what will it mean and when. I think those things are very important. And then if a change needs to be affected, remember I said change is not always negative, it can be positive. It's about, you will always get early adopters. You will always get people that will say, listen, okay, this is life, this is how things are, things change, and therefore we're going to help, we're going to support you. What support do you need, etc. I've often found that when you're doing a level of transformation, it's a challenge. You can be, you know, seen in a very unpopular way. But then sometimes when the change happens, people appreciate that at the end of the journey, but not whilst you're going through the journey. So I try to, in terms of strategies, I try my best not to take things personally. I know that as a HR professional, as a leader, an executive of a multinational company, Tullow, for example, you know, there are going to be things that you will do that won't always be popular.
Of course.
There are going to be things that you do that people very much appreciate. And I think that as a leader, you need to take all of them in hand. So I try not to take things personally. I do try to make sure I engage and bring people along. I do try to work with the line managers and the leadership to be able to ensure that we affect the change. If I'm working with a change team, obviously sometimes we're under a lot of pressure to get things done. I try to be empathetic, but realizing that we have a change to deliver as well. And the results of the change are just as important as obviously bringing people through at the same time.
Excellent. So engaging the stakeholders, asking questions, and most importantly, keeping the people at the center of your decision making.
Absolutely.
Excellent. That's very good. I mean, so far you've been doing a great job at it. You're winning all these awards, getting acknowledged, and very well deserved. So I'm part of the HR mentorship program. I like bragging about that because I think it's really, really, really awesome. So what can we expect this year? It's a 1-year journey.
It is. And I think it gets better and better each time. We've got some fantastic mentees. I think they're super hungry. They're excited about their change process. We had our first session with them last week, and they were wowed and excited and are probably a little scared at the same time. But you know, when you're transforming, changing, as I said, it's not always a comfortable journey. And what I've said to lots of mentees in the past is get used to being uncomfortable. So I think there's a lot. We are partnering with CIBS, so that's the China Europe International Business School, and so they're going to bring a lot of academic rigor to the program, and we're going to build in some financial skills as well. We've got mentors that we've worked with before, but we've got new mentors like yourself that are coming on. We have mentors that are super, super passionate about the development of people in this profession, and I'm very excited about that. And then obviously from a Tullow perspective, we are super excited. This is about capacity building. Some people say, why are we starting with the human resource? Why not?
That's where it starts.
Is where I say. And you know, we are also about our capacity building, our localization, our local content agenda. We're about, you know, oil and gas, but we're about making impact in Ghana as well. So we're very, very excited about this journey. And most importantly, the growth that we'll see, because eventually over time, if not already, we're seeing that it's really impacting the profession that is human resources.
Excellent. So if one wants to get in touch with Mrs. Irene Asare, how can they do that? How can we get in touch?
You can get in touch with me through LinkedIn, probably the best kind of mode of contact. And I'm generally always available and approachable and ready to kind of engage with people.
Excellent, excellent. So we have come to the end. This is always the saddest part, you know, because it's such great conversation. But I'm sure this is not the last time they're going to hear from you on these very topics. And I'm excited about the HR mentoring program. I'm excited about the mentees, the mentors, and it's just an exciting time to be in our be in HR, be in our sector. So.
But thank you very much. It's been a great opportunity.
No problem.
I just want to end by saying that, like you said, mentoring, it's from a Ghana perspective, this is the first of its kind. And I'm super excited for that. This is about innovation. This is about development of people. This is about doing things differently. And it's about starting with our human resource. So I urge every practitioner to be super excited about this, support the journey. Let's try and impact as many people as possible. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. You heard it for yourself, right? So it's a very exciting time in HR, and unfortunately, we have come to an end. Thank you so much for watching, and you can always get in touch with us with any of your human resource related questions. Thank you again to all of our sponsors, and we will see you next week.